Born and raised in Tennessee, Bobby received his bachelor's degree with a dual major in economics and political science. Not only does he understand how the economy works, but the profound effects politics has on the economy as well. After completing his undergraduate degree at Tennessee in 3 years, he entered the dual degree program, obtaining a law degree combined with an MBA at the age of 23. He is a novelist and best-selling author as well. His latest work is called New Madrid Earthquake. Bobby, you keep writing these great books. Welcome back.
Well, thank you, George. And, here's the irony of this. When you and I spoke last on Coast to Coast AM 5 years ago, it was to discuss the threat of EMPs.
That's right.
And cover art, you kind of chastised me a little bit because it showed the Gateway Arch and this big blast of light over the top. And you said, why do you want to do this to my beloved St. Louis? Well, here I am 5 years later with the story of the New Madrid seismic zone, which is right underneath your feet.
Yeah, exactly. I could probably feel it. I was here a couple of years ago, and there was a minor earthquake of about a 3.4, and I was on CNN talking about it. It was right after I had gotten off the air, and I gave them a call, and I said, "Folks, I just felt something." They went, "Oh, but we know, and it's you." So on I was, and there we are. But we're going to talk about this in a second. But you're a novelist, but you write about things that can really happen, don't you?
Yeah, I believe in writing realistic fiction that's based on science and as well as history. And the things that using New Madrid or even Yellowstone and pandemics, that's always a hot topic right now, everything I write in my fiction works has either happened before or it's, science makes it plausible to happen. And I try my very best to outline the science without having readers' eyes gloss over. Then I tell the story of good people where bad things happen to them with the intent of not only teaching readers what to look for when it comes to these, catastrophic events, but how to react and what to do when they happen. So it's a little bit entertainment and it's a little bit of a teachable moment every time you pick up one of my books.
I want to get your quick reaction because you've got a major in economics of the plan to do away with $10,000 each in student loan debt, maybe more. Do you think that's pretty good?
Well, to be honest, as a fiscal conservative, my opinion is the first thing you have to ask is who do they think is going to pay for the education that was just written off? Your tax dollars, my tax dollars. And then I think about the people who did struggle working night jobs or maybe working 2 jobs while in school to make ends meet and to pay their own tuition, only to have someone else who decided that they just didn't want to pay or couldn't, and they get a break. And there's a fairness aspect, there's an economic aspect, especially from the nation's budget. I think there's better ways to deal with this besides just writing things off to pander to a certain group of people. But that's why some people either love me or hate me.
Bobby, let's talk about this New Madrid fault. It, of course, has been around since the beginning of the planet, but kind of describe where it goes. And as you just mentioned, it hits St. Louis, but it goes all the way down south, too, doesn't it?
Yes, the New Madrid seismic zone is a really poorly understood fault region. Everyone's familiar with San Andreas and its relationship to California and being on a plate boundary, and it's a very active fault, so it's constantly in the news. But New Madrid kind of zigzags from the southwest to the northeast, going through Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, and Kentucky, and even recent scientific study seems to think that New Madrid may be connected to the Wabash Valley seismic zone, which is based in Illinois and Indiana, just northwest of Evansville. So it may be larger than even most scientists have believed for many years. And it's also different from a lot of seismic zones in that it is what's known as an intraplate seismic zone. In other words, you have some areas like San Andreas, which are in between plates, and these plates are constantly shifting and going back and forth. Well, New Madrid is right in the center of the North American continent, And so it acts and reacts differently to, stresses under Earth. And folks who live in the region and are familiar with St. Louis, like yourself, or Memphis and all the areas in between, have dealt with this all their lives and the occasional shake. But when the big one comes, it's going to have a profound effect on the heartland of our country.
I think so too. Tell us about the book, the new book that you've written, which is done again in a novel type form, New Madrid Earthquake.
Well, I tried to set up the story. First off, I introduce characters, which is typical of a fiction novel. But I also inject an expert, and in this case, this is someone who works at the National Earthquake Information Center, which I went to when I appeared on your Beyond Belief program. I'd had some free time.
Yep.
And at the NEIC, they monitor these things. And in fact, as we're speaking tonight, I have opened the USGS quake map showing the active earthquakes by the second, and it's really fascinating to see how many occur around the world. Just in case one comes your way, I'll give you a heads up.
Great, thanks.
But the idea is to teach the reader a little bit about the scientific background of the story, using real people and how they react and what their steps are whenever this catastrophic event starts to unfold. And then at some point in time, early on in the book, the event hits, and each of the character groups are in different places, and they're unique. There's women, men, children. They're all in different places. I've got two of the characters there in St. Louis at the top of one metropolitan and downtown.
Know it well.
So you try to give that realism so the reader can put themselves in the story as it unfolds.
600 million years ago, North American continent almost tore itself in half because of the New Madrid, wasn't it?
Well, it's an interesting story that it's hard for us to relate to something that occurred so long ago that is in fact still occurring now. But in terms of our, what we can comprehend as time, we know what happened yesterday and next week and 5 years ago and what have you. But over time, Earth has changed, and it's been fried, it's been frozen, it's been gassed, it's been bombarded from space, and all of these continents over time drifted apart. And 600 million years ago, that happened, and the North American continent, which actually at the time was pretty much upside down and located somewhere down where Argentina is now, moved around, and it tried to split again. And this massive upheaval and this battle between one side of the North American continent and the other continued for millions of years, and it never could quite get a divorce from one another. And that rift, which is commonly known as the Reelfoot Rift, is still in place. It's kind of like a jagged scar that's buried beneath the Earth's surface. And over time, it tries to move itself back and forth, and then 200 years ago, or just slightly over, it kind of reawakened in a big way.
Do we get a warning with any kind of earthquake, whether it's San Andreas or New Madrid?
Well, especially at San Andreas, which kind of like the Yellowstone supervolcano is the most studied and monitored volcano in the world. San Andreas, especially because of its location in the high population areas of California, is one of the most monitored and studied fault systems in the world. And it's also very active, again, because it's right there on that plate boundary. With New Madrid, of course, the USGS is constantly monitoring it, and universities have programs that study it, but it doesn't have the same amount of activity, so it's not given quite the attention. To answer your question, though, yes, there would be foreshocks, but because of the fact that it's in the center of a continent as opposed to being on a plate boundary, New Madrid is most likely to just hit you with boom, right off the bat. Here's the big one. And that's kind of what happened in 1811.
And it was so big, did it not turn the direction of the Mississippi River?
Yes, it did. In fact, it was the quake was felt, and it was a series of quakes that took place, and again, you talk about some irony. The first one occurred on December 16th, 1811. Ironically, December 16th was the day you and I had our last program together on Coast to Coast AM. But the earthquakes occurred on December 16th, and then there were several aftershocks, and another one in January 23rd of 1812, and then February 7th was another big one. And these series of quakes were in the 7.5 to 8.8 magnitude range, which is just massive. And at the time, this is an area that wasn't very populated at all. And by the time that the quake wave rolled across America, it was felt in Boston. It was felt by President James Madison wrote to Thomas Jefferson that he was awakened from his sleep as a result of the quake activity. And then there's what's known as the fluvial tsunami. That is basically a fancy word for saying the Mississippi River flowed backwards. I have in the back of the print editions of New Madrid Earthquake probably 40 or 50 pages of real world letters and newspaper articles from the time where people describe their feelings, what they observed, and all the men who had boats on the Mississippi trying to take goods up and down talked about how water started running backwards for several hours.
Stay with us, Bobby. We're going to take a break. We'll come back for more on Coast to Coast AM.
The Coast website is now streamlined for mobile devices. Great news if you're a Coast insider or simply want to enjoy our website on your phone. Visit coasttocoastam.com on your iPhone or Android browser.